What if I told you that a mother without her right arm managed to raise her child alone, facing poverty, prejudice, and abandonment, and still turned it all into a successful business? This is the story of Marta, a brave mother from Braga, who showed the world that we're not defined by what we lack, but by the courage to keep fighting every single day. Get ready to witness a journey that will touch your heart and prove that a mother's love can conquer the impossible. In a quiet village in the Braga region of Portugal, among stone alleyways and old houses steeped in generations of stories, lived a woman who seemed invisible to the world, but carried within her a strength that was hard to explain. Her name was Marta Soares, and from an early age, life showed her it would not be kind. Marta was born with a congenital malformation that left her without her right arm. As a child, she heard the neighbors whispering, saw the sideways glances, and more than once heard phrases that cut deeper than any physical pain. Poor thing. She'll never be able to take care of a home, let alone a child. She never responded. Silently, she stored every word like fuel, as if telling herself, one day they'll see who I really am. She grew up with her mother, Dona Lourdes, a sweet but strong woman who never let her daughter feel less because of her condition. You are whole, my child. You have your heart, your mind, your legs, that's what matters. And Marta believed her. She learned to do everything with her left arm and over time developed an impressive skill. She wrote fast, cooked, cleaned, braided her cousin's hair, all with a dedication that left everyone speechless. In her teens, she started working at a small stationery shop in the village. There, among notebooks and birthday cards, a quiet passion bloomed. She loved wrapping gifts, decorating window displays, creating little presents with ribbons, bows, and colorful paper. Over time, she realized she had a special talent for turning simple things into something enchanting. It seemed small from the outside, but for Marta, it was a piece of a dream taking shape. That was when she met Tiago, a young man with kind eyes who seemed to see beyond her missing arm. They fell in love slowly and beautifully, like a flower blooming at the start of spring. They married a few years later, and soon the news came. Marta was pregnant. It was the happiest moment of her life. Her heart beat fast, torn between fear and excitement, but she could only think of one thing. I'm going to be a mother, and nothing will stop me from being the best mother I can be. The pregnancy went smoothly, and 9 months later, Diogo was born, a healthy boy with bright eyes like his father's. When she held him in her arms for the first time, Marta felt that the world could collapse outside, but inside her, there was a universe full of strength and love. But life, as always, wasn't simple. Tiago, who had once been present and loving, began to change over time. First came the absences, then the silences. Then came the arguments, the harsh words, and finally the departure. He left when Diogo was just 2 years old, leaving Marta alone with a child in her arms and a pile of bills on the table. The village, which once felt cozy, now became a web of pitiful glances and whispered comments. Alone. And with that disability, how will she manage? It was as if the world was testing Marta's limits, saying, let's see how far you can go. But what no one knew was that this brave mother had already crossed many internal limits long before her son was even born. Marta took a deep breath. There was no time to cry. With just one arm, she learned to change diapers, bathe Diogo, prepare his bottle, wash clothes, cook, all by herself. Many times, she would wake up in the middle of the night to his crying and stumble across the house in exhaustion, but she never complained. On the contrary, she was moved to see her son grow, take his first steps, smile with his eyes. Despite her physical limitations, she was a whole mother. No pat more than whole, she was extraordinary. And Diogo, from a very young age, learned to admire every gesture of his mother. He looked at her as if she were a superhero, and in a way, she truly was. The biggest problem began when Marta lost her job. The stationery store where she had worked since she was 16 closed its doors, and she was left without a steady income. She began taking small jobs, making party favors, personalized gift wrapping for special dates, selling online and at local fairs. The money barely covered the essentials. It got to the point where she had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying her son's milk. It was a dark time, both literally and emotionally. Sometimes she spent nights by candlelight, with Diogo sleeping beside her, while she sat assembling gift baskets, decorating boxes, tying ribbons with her teeth because she only had one hand to hold everything else. Once, a neighbor offered to help. He suggested taking Diogo to stay with his family until Marta got back on her feet financially. She politely thanked him, but inside she was shattered. The idea of being apart from her son, even temporarily, was unbearable. That night, alone in the kitchen, she closed her eyes tightly and whispered, "If I have to go hungry, I will, but he's not going anywhere." That's when an idea began to take root in her heart, something she had always dreamed of but had seemed impossible, to have her own store, a little space of her own where she could create her gifts, arrange her baskets, and offer something with the special touch only she knew how to give. At first, it felt like wishful thinking. With what money? What setup? But Marta decided to take the first step. She began saving every cent she could spare. She made a list of materials she needed. She watched videos online, read about entrepreneurship, took free online courses, all with Diogo by her side, sometimes in her lap, sometimes coloring on a sheet of paper at the kitchen table. During the day, she made deliveries on foot, pushing Diogo's stroller with one hand and balancing packages with the other. At night, she organized her accounts and planned the next steps. It wasn't easy, not at all, but every time she thought about giving up, she remembered her mother's words, "You are whole, my daughter, and you have your heart." That phrase became her mantra, her driving force, her shield against discouragement. It was also during that time that Diogo began to understand things more. Already 4 years old, he saw his mother do everything with one hand, and instead of asking why, he asked, "How do you do it, Mommy?" And she smiled, eyes full of tears, saying, "Because you are my reason, son." At school, some children started asking questions about his mother's arm. Diogo, with the innocence of someone who loves without judgment, once answered, "My mom doesn't have 2 arms, but she has 2 hearts, one for her and one for me." Those words echoed in Marta like an anthem. That was it. It wasn't about what she lacked. It was about what she had in abundance: love, resilience, courage. And with that, she kept going. One step at a time, one gift wrap at a time, one sleepless night at a time, but always with her head held high, her soul strong, and her eyes fixed on a future that, though distant, had begun to shine on the horizon. Marta's fight didn't stem only from the absence of an arm, the absence of a husband, or the poverty surrounding her. It came from something much deeper, the unshakable desire to be a mother, to be present, to win, not for herself, but for her son. And that desire, that spark burning inside her, was beginning to turn into a fire that no one could extinguish. Life seemed to test Marta at every turn. Just when she thought she could catch her breath, another strong wave would pull her back under. The truth is, during that time, daily survival was practically an art. Money wasn't enough, bills piled up, and her custom gift orders were still too few to cover all the expenses. But even so, Marta didn't give in. Diogo was already 5 years old and starting to understand his mother's struggles more clearly. Every time the lights were cut off or there was no meat on the table, he would ask simple, innocent questions that pierced her heart like a blade. "Mommy, why are we having just bread and cheese for dinner today?" She would take a deep breath, force a smile, and reply, "Because sometimes the simple things are more special, sweetheart." At that point, Marta had to be 2, 3, 4 women in one. In the morning, she got her son ready for school, cleaned the house, and rushed out to try to sell her handmade creations. When someone ordered a gift basket, it was like a beam of hope. She poured her soul into every detail: neatly folded ribbons, the perfect bow, matching colors. But to the competitive market, it still wasn't enough. Once, she decided to take some of her products to the weekly market in Braga. She woke up before sunrise, set up an improvised table, arranged the baskets and gift wraps, and stood there full of hope. But the hours passed, and few people showed interest. Some asked about prices and thought they were too high. Others simply glanced and walked away. Marta's face burned with shame. By the end of the day, she had sold only 2 small items. The profit barely covered the transport fare. On the way home, with frozen hands and a heavy heart, she cried silently on the bus, trying not to draw attention. Diogo slept, leaning on her shoulder, unaware of the weight his mother carried. She looked at him and thought, "I can't give up, I won't give up." Despite the failures, Marta kept going. She decided to go door to door offering her work. Some shop owners listened patiently. Others turned her away immediately. "We don't have space for that, madam," they said. She thanked them, swallowed her pride, and moved on, and little by little, that's how she secured a few small selling spots. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The biggest challenge, however, wasn't just financial. It was people's eyes. Many times, when she walked into a store to propose a partnership, she felt their gaze fall first on her missing arm. Some asked rude questions, others just frowned. It was as if the world always reduced her to what she lacked, forgetting everything she had in abundance. But Marta had learned from a young age to turn pain into fuel, and every time she felt that judgment, she thought of Diogo. "If I shrink away, what will I be teaching my son? He needs to see courage, not fear." Time went on, and the pressure grew. The money she earned barely covered basic needs, and Marta went through times when she had to ask for help, something that cost her more than any physical effort. She knocked on the door of the parish council, where she received some temporary support, but she knew she couldn't live on that. Dependency didn't match her essence. Then came one of the hardest periods. The landlord of the house she rented warned her that if she didn't pay the overdue months, she'd have to leave. Marta felt the ground vanish beneath her. Where would she go with a small child? She spent sleepless nights thinking of solutions, scribbling ideas in an old notebook, doing math over and over. Diogo, noticing her distress, sometimes climbed into bed next to her and said, "Mommy, everything's going to be okay. I believe in you." Those words, spoken with a child's innocence, had the power to restore her strength. "If he believes in me, then I have to believe in myself too," she thought. So she decided to take a bigger risk. She started creating exclusive products, personalized pieces no one else made in the area, small framed messages, keepsakes for baptisms and weddings, themed baskets for special occasions. She spent endless hours experimenting, making mistakes, starting over, but she didn't give up. During that process, she also faced indirect prejudice toward Diogo. Some school mothers whispered among themselves, suggesting the child might struggle without a father figure, or for living with a mother with limitations. Marta heard painful comments, but stood firm. She always explained to her son that every family is unique and that love is what truly matters. One day stood out. Diogo came home from school upset because a classmate told him his mother would never achieve anything because she didn't have an arm. Marta hugged him tightly, with tears in her eyes but also with fierce determination. "Son, look at me. Do you see lack or do you see strength?" he whispered. "I see strength." Marta smiled, holding his face. "Then always remember that. We're not what we lack. We are what we do with what we have." Those words stayed with Diogo and, in a way, with the entire community. Little by little, some people began to see Marta differently. They admired her perseverance, saw her fighting every day without ever complaining. And during that time of immense sacrifice, an unexpected support network began to form. An elderly woman, Donna Amelia, a customer who bought one of Marta's baskets, was so impressed by her dedication that she started recommending her work to others. A teacher at Diogo's school asked her to prepare gifts for an event. Small doors were opening, almost quietly, but each one was a breath of hope. Still, life remained tough. There were days Marta went to bed without dinner, saving the little she had for her son. Days she washed clothes by hand in freezing water because she couldn't afford the electricity to use the machine. Days she looked at shop windows in the city center and felt deep pain, as if there were a chasm between what she dreamed and what she had. But no matter how much it hurt, Marta never stopped dreaming, never. The dream of owning her own store was like a small flame, but a persistent one that resisted every storm. She might be at her lowest, but she never stopped imagining the day she would open a glass door, turn on the lights, see the shelves full of her own products, and greet customers with a smile. That vision was what kept her alive. It was what gave her the strength to get up every morning, even when her body ached from so much effort. And it was during one of those days of struggle that Marta had a memorable conversation with Diogo. He asked, "Mommy, when are you going to have your store?" Marta took a deep breath and answered, "I don't know yet, son, but I know one day we will." And when that day comes, you'll be there with me, cutting the ribbon at the grand opening." Diogo smiled, believing without hesitation. And in that smile, Marta found the courage she needed to keep going. Because the challenges were many. The lack of money, the prejudice, the weight of responsibility, the constant fear of failure. But there was something greater than all of that. The certainty that a brave mother never spares effort when it comes to her child's well-being. And so Marta kept going, facing a stormy sea, but with her eyes fixed on the horizon. Because even if it was still far away, she knew her time would come. The days seemed all the same, but Marta felt something inside her had changed. After so many years of effort, pain and sacrifice, she had reached a point where giving up would be betraying everything she had lived through. It was as if each tear, each sleepless night, and each humiliation had been a seed, and now she was about to see whether any of them would blossom. It was on a cold morning, while sipping coffee silently in her kitchen, that she received an unexpected call. It was a local businesswoman, owner of a small decor shop in the center of Braga. She had heard about Marta's work through satisfied customers. "We're looking for someone creative to make exclusive keepsakes for special dates. I'd love to talk with you." Marta almost dropped her mug. It might have been just a small contract, but to her, it was the open door she had dreamed of. The next day, she put on the best clothes she had, fixed her hair, and went to the meeting. Her heart was pounding. Her palms were sweaty, but she kept a steady posture. The businesswoman, Donna Isabel, was impressed with the delicacy of the samples Marta brought. "You can feel there's soul in what you do," she said. And that was the beginning of her first real partnership. For months, Marta worked tirelessly for that store. She created personalized gifts for weddings, baptisms, birthdays, and holidays. Each piece was an extension of her struggle. And little by little, her name began to spread by word of mouth. Customers praised not just the quality, but the story behind every creation. Then, one autumn afternoon, while walking with Diogo through the city center, she passed a small space that was for rent. It was simple, a bit worn, but it had a wide shop window that seemed to call her name. Marta stopped, stared, and felt her heart race. Diogo noticed and asked, "Mommy, do you picture your store here?" She smiled, her eyes brimming. "I picture it every day, son." That night, Marta couldn't sleep. She grabbed the old notebook where she always jotted down ideas and began sketching plans. She did the math, made lists, tried to organize every detail. Fear whispered that it was impossible, but hope screamed that this was her moment. The money, however, was still tight. She needed help. After much reflection, she decided to apply for a support program for small entrepreneurs sponsored by the city council. She prepared like never before. She wrote up a business plan, put together a portfolio with photos of her work, and wrote a heartfelt letter sharing her story. On the day of her presentation, she walked into the room trembling but with her head held high. When she finished her speech, there was silence for a few seconds. Marta thought she had failed, but then came murmurs of approval. One of the judges said, "Your story is a testament to resilience. Your talent is evident. What you're showing us here is not just a business, it's an inspiration." A few weeks later, she got the answer. The funding had been approved. Marta fell to her knees in her living room, hugging Diogo, and cried like she hadn't cried in years. It was as if life had finally decided to open a door for her after so many setbacks. With the financial support, Marta rented the small space she had long dreamed of. The first weeks were a mix of chaos and joy. She painted the walls with the help of friends, arranged the shelves, decorated the display window with dried flowers, colorful boxes, and meticulously wrapped gifts. With each detail, she felt closer to her dream. On the grand opening day, the emotion was indescribable. Marta wore white, styled her hair, and holding Diogo's hand, cut the red ribbon that marked the start of her new life. The little boy shouted, "It's my mum's store," and applause echoed through the narrow street, from neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had heard about the woman who didn't let the absence of an arm define her story. The shop, named Mimos da Vida, quickly became known. Customers came not only for the products, but for the energy the place radiated. It wasn't just gifts being sold there, it was pieces of love, wrapped in courage. Marta made sure to personally greet each customer with a smile, listen to stories, and suggest unique creations. It was as if each customer became part of her family. Diogo, now older, helped out on weekends. He proudly told his classmates, "My mom has a shop. She's the strongest woman I know." And in fact, Marta had become a role model not just to her son, but to many other women in the community. Over the years, the business grew. Marta diversified her products, hired help, and began attending larger fairs, taking her store's name beyond Braga's borders. With every achievement, she remembered the days she cried in secret, afraid she wouldn't be able to feed her son. Today, she was living proof that pain can be turned into strength. There was one particularly symbolic moment. One time, after returning from a fair in Lisbon, she received an unexpected message from Tiago, the man who had abandoned her years earlier. He said he'd seen a feature story about her and wanted to meet Diogo. Marta took a deep breath. The past still hurt, but she was no longer the same woman. She agreed to the meeting, but made one thing clear. "He's our son, but I'm the one who taught him what it means to fight." When Tiago saw Diogo, he was struck by the boy's maturity and, above all, the deep bond between mother and son. And in that moment, Marta realized something. She no longer needed recognition from the one who left. The real recognition was right there in front of her, in her son's proud eyes. Mimos da Vida became a symbol of overcoming challenges throughout the region. News stories were done, speaking invitations came in, and Marta began inspiring other mothers who also carried seemingly insurmountable burdens. She always repeated, "We are not defined by what we lack, but by what we do with what we have." And Diogo, now a teenager, remained her biggest fan. One night, while closing the shop, he hugged her tightly and said, "Mom, you showed everyone that you're more than a brave mother. You're the best mom in the world." Marta smiled through tears because she knew that no matter how much she had achieved, nothing was greater than hearing that. The journey had been tough, marked by financial hardship, prejudice, and sleepless nights of despair. But the ending made one thing clear. Marta hadn't just won. She had turned every scar into a showcase of hope. And so, the woman who was once underestimated, who people said wouldn't be able to raise a child on her own, now opened her store every day with a heart full of gratitude. Because deep down, she knew that each ribbon, each bow, each gift leaving Mimos da Vida was more than a product. It was living proof that a mother's love can move mountains. And Marta, with only one arm but a heart as big as the world, showed her son, her community, and everyone who crossed her path that no limitation can dim the light of someone who carries within them the true essence of a brave mother. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are many other brave mothers around the world, fighting and winning invisible battles every day. Here on the channel, we tell these stories so that we never forget the power of maternal love. So, if you want to keep receiving messages of hope and courage, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with someone who needs a spark of inspiration. Together, we can spread this light that warms the soul.